When you're first getting into something and you're starting to research and try and learn about it, there can really be an abundance of overwhelming information. For example, right now I'm trying to get into free diving. So far I can hold my breath just sitting there stable for about 5 minutes, and when I'm swimming it's a lot harder than that. But when I look into free diving online, there's just so much that I don't understand. So much that I can read it a million times and it's not really gonna make me any better. So what do? I just go out there and try it. And I hope that through just simply going out there, trying it, seeing it for myself, and feeling it, that when I come back to that information, I can understand it a lot better and utilize it a lot better. Now, when I was first getting into backpacking, I was really into the outdoors, or at least I felt like I was. I had gone hiking and car camping with my parents, and never really on my own, and especially never by myself. When I first set off on that big backpacking trip, that first one, it wasn't really my idea. It was my friend Sarah, and she was much more into this than I was. I'd gone over to her house once and she had this really awesome 50-liter Kelty backpack, and it was so cool, and just all these little tiny gadgets and things. I was mesmerized. I just thought it seemed like such a cool idea and such a cool concept to go out for 2-3 days, or potentially a lot longer, and just be out there surviving. I guess my idea was kind of more in line with maybe bushcraft or Survivor Man. Right after Christmas, she had gotten all this stuff and she was prepared and ready to go and try it out and use it, and she knew that I was into the outdoors, and I had gone all camping all these times, and I had spent all this time kind of just outside running through the woods. And she asked me, and she asked another one of her friends. I'm sure she asked many other people, but me and Morgan were the only ones who were really game to go. I had mentioned to her that, oh cool, I have this big backpack from my grandfather. It has these awesome metal bars all along the sides, and I can strap all this stuff to it, and I just knew I had all this stuff that was gonna just make this time the best time ever. And so the time is coming. I think it was the night before when I finally started to think oh wow, I'm going camping tomorrow. And our plan was to go out for 3 days, 2 nights, and camp, hike, backpack. But I didn't really know what that meant, to be honest. I went through all of my stuff, all of my parents' stuff, and all of my grandfather's stuff that we had lying around, and sure enough, I got out that giant external frame backpack and I looked at it. I'm like, wow, that thing looks cool. Military Army green. I'm sure he had been assigned this pack many, many years ago when he was serving. I tried it on and it sucked. It sucked so bad. Straps didn't fit. It was really uncomfortable, even empty, and I just could not wear this thing. So I decided last minute to scrap that big backpack idea. Now the only other backpack I really had was a Jan Sport backpack, a school bag that I had won at a baseball game. It had the stadium's name on it. Now, I think I had a sleeping bag at the time. I might have had a few things here and there, but I couldn't really fit much in that backpack. It was so small. Most backpacking stuff is so big and bulky, so just nothing would go in there. So I couldn't fit my sleeping bag in it, so I replaced my sleeping bag with a towel, and I started going through the rest of my stuff, and I learned very quickly that I had to be extremely selective of what I could bring, just because this backpack could not fit anything in it. What I wound up carrying was a towel and a bunch of water bottles, partly because I didn't know any better. I didn't know what 3 days of backpacking meant. I just didn't even think about it. It didn't really cross my mind. I was maybe 16 or 15. So I had a towel and some water bottles, and that was what I was going to be carrying for 3 days through the Florida wilderness. Beyond that, I had some skateboard shoes. I just thought that's all I really needed. I kind of feel like if you don't make mistakes, then you never really learn. Her mom took one picture of us before we left. I wish so bad I could find that photo. Her mom left, and we were off on our own at this point. Now, I very quickly into this trip learned that what I had was not going to be enough. And this first came in the big epiphany and the big wave of understanding that I was wearing skateboarding shoes for what was going to be 30 miles of walking through Florida swamps. I just totally skid and slipped all across the mud. They filled up with water and dirt and muck, and they just weren't happening. They weren't working. So within 10 minutes or maybe even 5 minutes of starting this hike, starting this 3-day trip, I realized my shoes were not even sort of going to work. I took them off. I took them off, and with absolutely no intention of putting them back on for the remainder of the trip, just because it was that bad. Imagine walking through a lot of stuff like this with some skateboard shoes on. It's not a great idea. Also, not a great idea walking through stuff like this barefoot. Though maybe I was stepping on some things here and there and getting little cuts in my feet, it really wasn't that bad, because most of the time we were walking through water, swamplands, wetlands, grasslands, all these other things. The trail was pretty well maintained, and I was feeling pretty happy about that decision to remove my shoes. One thing that was quickly deemed a problem, just naturally, I walked a lot faster than the two girls I was with. And I apparently didn't really think that I needed to slow down. So before I knew it, I had already gone like 5 miles and 6 miles, and they were well behind me. And I just didn't know what was happening with them. And frankly, at the time, I didn't really think about it that much, other than hopefully they're having as much fun as I am. Morgan was not really having as much fun as I was, and walking 12 miles that first day was a lot. It is a lot for like a first backpacking trip when you're carrying some heavy pack and you're hiking through swampland. So I think that maybe if I hadn't gone ahead, we might have as a group turned around, but of course there was no way to contact me. We get to the campsite, 12 miles have gone by, I'm totally barefoot. Morgan is maybe not the happiest, but now we've done it. We're through that first day. We've gone hiking and backpacking. And now it is time for the best part to most people, the camping. Obviously, I didn't have anything. All I had was a towel and some water. Sarah, of course, had a lot of cool stuff, as I had remembered. And again, it was not my intention for her to just like baby us the entire time. She wanted to be just as self-sufficient as the rest of us. But when it comes down to it, we were very lucky that Sarah was so prepared. Because this could have been a lot worse. Here we were, 12 miles out in an already really remote area that is just super far away from any real civilization, and we were in the middle of a swamp. So fortunately, Sarah had not just enough stuff for her, but also enough stuff for all of us. I believe we all wound up sleeping in the same tent, I underneath my beautiful little towel. We made it through the first night, but it was very clear at that time that I wasn't really ready for this. Maybe Morgan wasn't really ready for this, and that maybe we should have a rain check and come back for round 2 some other time when we've thought about it a little bit more, because now I had all these great ideas. Start hiking again, and we're still walking through swamps, and we make it quite far. We were actually, unbeknownst to us at the time, we were actually only half a mile away from the campsite we were going to. At the time, I'm sure we thought we had like miles and miles and miles to go, but really we were right there, and we had no idea. So we kind of devised a plan to leave, you know, even though we are literally smack dab in the middle of this trip. Right in the middle, out in nowhere's land with nothing close around to us. Fortunately, Sarah had some rudimentary GPS where she roughly could figure out that, okay, so far over that direction there's a road. She also was able to get a message out to, I believe, my mom, because my family just has long time explored these areas, and I guess we figured that they would be able to find us. Out here in the middle of nowhere, just at this point, it would be well after dark. So even though we were just a half a mile away from that next campsite, we decided to start walking miles out of our way to get to this random road that we didn't know if it was going to have some sort of gate on it that would be like 30 miles down the road in the other direction. We didn't know if it was paved or dirt or traveled, or, you know, this was a long time ago and GPSs weren't great and our understanding of the area was much, much worse. Now, remember, we're walking through swamps most of the time, and this is the trail. This is where someone has designated to put the trail. So imagine, once you get off of that trail, is it going to be better or is it going to be worse? It's going to be a lot worse. And we wound up walking through water that was up to our chest, and just like going through canals and going through areas that were really, really, really overgrown, just hoping to get to this road at some point. And as we're walking this way, the sun is setting and it's just getting darker and darker and darker. And things are just not looking bright for us. Finally, we did get to this road right around sunset, right maybe just after dark. And although the mosquitoes were tearing us up, we had this idea that my mom was gonna come find us. Fortunately, there was no gate blocking off this road, and she was actually able to get out there. I still to this day don't really know which road that was, but sure enough, after maybe half an hour or an hour of sitting there, the mosquitoes tearing us up, just pitch black at this point, still middle of nowhere, here comes a car, and it is my mother. And that was the end of our trip. That was the end of our first backpacking adventure, and especially my first backpacking adventure. At this point, I've gone off and I've hiked a lot of things. I've hiked all up and down the East Coast. I've done the Appalachian Trail once and a half, or once and more than a half. I've done the International Appalachian Trail and just all these other things. Gone out west and hiked out there a few times, and just all sorts of cool stuff. And it's cool to kind of think back on these first times that kind of got me there, you know, and like with an experience like this, why would I ever want to come back out here and do it? But to tell you the truth, that was a wonderful experience. Sure, it was just rife with me making mistakes and things you should never really do in backpacking and all of that stuff, but you know, it gave me a whole new understanding of what I needed out there, you know, and how I can do this better next time. And it gave me a jumping point for doing my research online and stuff along those lines. So I really feel like sometimes, you know, you need to put the computer down and just go out there and do it. And of course, try and be safe about it. You know, don't be like me exactly, but you know, without ever making those mistakes, and if things went like relatively hunky-dory, I'm not sure I would be in the same place. You know, I'm not sure I would have ever found that drive to do it better. Because ultimately, that is the story of my hiking. Every time I go out, I want to do it better. I want to do it bigger and all of these things. And you know, when it comes to making mistakes, I think it's better to make all your mistakes early on than it is to make them much further down the line when you could really seriously compromise your own safety and get in a lot of trouble. Whereas early on, you're probably not going to be far away from your house. You're probably not going to be far out into the woods. You know, the worst thing that would have happened to us out there, like what, we're 12, 15 miles into the woods. What if we were 30, 40, 50, 60, 100 miles out there? You know, as you could be once you already have a lot of experience, and maybe you're overconfident, having not ever made some horrible mistakes in the past. So ultimately, I think like, you don't learn anything when everything is good. You only really learn stuff when things are going wrong. Or at least that's how life has kind of been like for me. You know, so although I broke my foot on the Pacific Crest Trail last year, my first ever hike in 2012 on the Appalachian Trail, when I attempted that first thru hike, did not go super well. But you know what, all these experiences, I could chalk them up to failures, but ultimately I've learned more from those than I ever did walking the Eastern Continental Trail. You know, everything went relatively well on that hike. So, you know, get out there, make mistakes. There's a lot of information out there and it's easy to get overwhelmed, but truly the best thing you can do is to just go out and do it. Just like me and my freediving. I'm just getting out there and doing it. And you know what? I'm seeing progress. I still don't understand half of the things I read about it online, but it doesn't matter. At some point I will. So that's the story of my first ever backpack. It certainly didn't go as I had really wanted it to, but I think it went as well as I deserved. You know, and truly I couldn't have asked for something better. So that experience really blew my mind, really made me think about some things that otherwise I never really would have thought about, and ultimately I had an absolute blast. Just like on my first failed through hike attempt, I had an absolute blast. And certainly I will be back out there doing it again and again and again and again.